It's nice and cool. Well, I leave my coffee.
Good morning, this is Senate Judiciary again. But continuing our debate, our discussion of S58, which is an omnibus crime bill with many moving parts, one of which is an original section from the original bill that changed the standard for knowing when I don't believe we've changed that section. Now I'm trying to get to that original bill. So we're working from draft 1.1 still?
No, 4.1.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, maybe. The problem is so big. I got 3.2. Bear with me.
Anyone else need a copy of 4.1?
I guess I do.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Okay.
I don't think we have 4.1 yet handed out. Anyway, what's not changed is the on section 1, fentanyl means any quantity of fentanyl, including any compound mixture, blah, blah, blah. But then the discussion ensued that knowingly means actual knowledge of one or more preparations, compounds, and that includes everything. So what is the impact of that, and why is that important? So I guess that's the question, and it hasn't changed from 1.1 to 4.1.
So Tim Leaders Dumont, Department of State Attorneys and Sheriffs, and as myself and Attorney Jones from Department of Public Safety noted, I think it was last week, that we were talking about this maybe Thursday or Friday, because of the marketplace, there is, there's no longer the Miami Vice pure cocaine, pure crack, pure heroin. That's not the marketplace. The marketplace is this constantly evolving mixture of pieces. And right now, fentanyl and xylazine are making the drug marketplace very, very dangerous. But the knowing standard, and it would just apply to this chapter, we think it would be an important change because it recognizes that we're not prosecuting pure substances anymore. We're prosecuting mixtures. And it could be that the fentanyl is in crack or cocaine, stimulants. It could be that it's in methamphetamine. It could be that it's in depressants like heroin. But to cordon off the knowing requirement to specific drug types would be.
Oh, this is 278.
I'm so sorry. You got the wrong 4.1.
I heard that this morning.
I think we did.
That's okay, Ben. Go ahead.
Oh, just to say that the current marketplace, fentanyl, xylazine are present in stimulants, not just your typical depressants where it used to be affiliated. So it's a part of all these different drug mixtures. And so the knowing requirement acknowledges the fact that we're not prosecuting pure substances. We're still using the old knowing standard, but as noted by judges in Vermont and in the Second Circuit since 1993, that is something that is a dated way of approaching drug prosecution in Vermont. So we think it would not have the same level of truth and prosecution impact if it were just cordoned off to a fentanyl or a xylazine.
So, question: the marketplace has changed dramatically, where people used to get pure heroin, pure cocaine, but it was always mixed with something. I mean, baking soda or whatever compound.
Right. There could.
I mean, it was never, my knowledge. Not that I have a lot of knowledge about it, but it wasn't pure. in the seventies or sixties when I worked in drug treatment and it wasn't pure.
Right.
It was mixed, but not with another drug. It was mixed to, number one, I think the purity of particularly heroin causes significant overdose. And number two, the cost would be higher. So,
Right, it was a way to take advantage of making more profit for less,
Right.
less of the underlying agent.
The question is, there's a couple of questions that have arisen. If we change the knowing standard, does that mean somebody could be charged with both sale of heroin and fentanyl, or just one?
So what we would do,
Just one drug? I mean, it's a mixture of compounds.
right, I think that the best answer to that would be that we, just like we do now, when there's the preliminary test that we get, that they do, officers and troopers have the opportunity to test something kind of preliminarily, that provides our probable cause to charge. So it could be, it depends on what we are capable of testing in that more immediate function. That's how we base our charges, right, on probable cause. But once the lab comes back and they give us a more exacting analysis, then we could amend charges, et cetera. I think in practice, the way that we would operate would be to prosecute, it depends on the discretion of a state's attorney as to how they would exercise that, but there wouldn't necessarily be a benefit to pursuing a heroin and a fentanyl charge. It would be to acknowledge that the knowing standard says they can't claim they didn't know that fentanyl was in the product, right? So that we could prosecute is the better way of thinking about it, almost in the inverse. Yeah.
Senator Norris.
I thought we took testimony during the course of this, and from whom, I don't know, because we've had so many witnesses in here, that in this particular instance, you can't charge for possession of fentanyl, and they would be charged with either a controlled substance or a regulated drug and not both.
For the possession charge,
Possession
fentanyl, that's
Possession of fentanyl is not against the law.
right.
Sale or dispensing is or trafficking.
We're still talking about with death resulting, right?
No, it could be with any. I don't think the two sections are separate. However, it would presumably make it easier in a death resulting to prove that they should have known that fentanyl was in the product or xylazine was in the product that they sold to the individual.
That's right. It would make it, the way we consider it to be, it's more truthful as to what we're trying to actually get at, the root of the issue being the most deadly agent or aspect of the compound.
Which reminds me of one thing. We should put in a section on Senator Sheehan and I were talking about this morning. We should put a section that requires the Department of Health to begin to more widely let people know about our Good Samaritan law. I think, it's kind of, people aren't even aware of it anymore. Now we're concentrating on all the other things, get testing and all that, which is great, but I think people are not aware of the Good Samaritan law, so we can put something in. Would also make, if there's any, I don't think there's any updates to that, but I haven't heard any need.
No, I'm happy to continue to talk about why we think this is important.
Yeah, Senator Miles today.
I don't have much more to say.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to use a lab to determine what's in a drug, and yet you expect a lay person to just know without, so we're changing the standard of knowingly to say, to apply it to any drug, and the person out on the street needs to, how are they supposed to know how the supply is changing if we have to rely on a lab?
In part because of the need to go to the lab, and because of the reality of the drug marketplace being so ubiquitous with deadly substances. Right, it kind of cuts both ways. a person is not out in the field, is not a chemist, like you recommended. Prosecutors aren't chemists, you know, defense attorneys aren't chemists, judges aren't chemists. We have to rely on something else to really get at the heart of the issue. That said, the world we're dealing with is human beings who are engaging in the conduct of distribution, sale, dispensing of right now the drug that is most deadly is fentanyl, and combined with xylazine, it's even more deadly. That's something that a human being in the marketplace, as noted by the Second Circuit over the last 30 years, has noted you shouldn't be able to claim you didn't know what was in the substance you were selling. Not because you know every aspect of it, but because you know that what you're selling could have a regulated drug in it. That's the point of the knowing standard. It doesn't say, this knowing standard doesn't say you knew that it was fentanyl, xylazine, heroin. It says knowing means actual knowledge that one or more preparations, compounds, mixtures, or substance contains the regulated drug identified in the applicable section. So we still have to identify the regulated drug. And what we're saying is you shouldn't be able to claim in 2024 that you don't know you have a regulated drug in that bag. It could be a bag, it could be a pill, it could be whatever the method for distribution.
Do you have a site for that Second Circuit?
Yes, it's
Assuming that
it's in my submission.
somebody had to defend this on the floor in the Senate, I'd like to have a copy of that.
Indeed, it's U.S. versus Rodriguez, 983 F2D, Second Circuit, 1993, and it's in my submission of last week, which I can send you.
Oh, okay, 1993. Second Circuit has recognized this since 1993. So, go ahead, Simon.
So, just following up on that, you said that the Second Circuit has recognized the second part of this new knowingly standard, which is consciously ignoring a substantial risk. Is that?
Yeah. So what the Second Circuit said was that if you find beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant was aware that there was a high probability, in this case it was a woman, that she possessed a drug that is a controlled substance, but that she deliberately and consciously avoided confirming this fact so she could deny knowledge if apprehended, then you may treat this deliberate avoidance as the equivalent of knowledge. Should
we have language that more so mirrors what's in the Second Circuit opinion? Like, should we, instead of having substantial risk, should we have high probability just so that there's consistency, or does that make a difference?
You could certainly mirror it to be more closely aligned with the Second Circuit. Our analysis is that your version is very close to the Second Circuit. It's not, I think the way I put it in my testimony was, it's not far adrift of what the Second Circuit said. I think it still accomplishes the same aim. So in totally a policy call, that language is, we have that Second Circuit language if helpful for you to contemplate, but I do think your current language achieves the same or similar results.
Thanks.
Yep.
We have a question on this little section. Big section. So when it comes to death result, that which is where part of the problem has come in, and some of the victims' families have told us, is it's the knowingly standard to prove that the person knew or should have known, and I keep using should have known, possibly that it was fentanyl-laced heroin that he was selling to the victim who died of an overdose, and that particular individual made no effort to do anything to help that person. So, that could be an affirmative. One way to get the Good Samaritan is make it affirmative offense if you attempted to follow.
We think the Good Samaritan law is very well drafted. I know Attorney Child and I talked about it a bit last year. I think the way that it works right now, which is very helpful, is, I think perhaps you're right, better education on it could be really helpful from a policy perspective. And I think we can always do better at better educating the public about the state of our laws so that they understand what's kind of on them. But in many instances, when I was prosecuting cases here in Washington County, I often utilized this looks like the Good Samaritan applies here. Officers are trying to figure out what happened, and they call me, and I say, you know what, they called you. It appears they called you shortly after the overdose, the alleged overdose. So, right, we're not sorting that out here. We're trying to save the person's life. I will say, and this, there's no changes to the Good Samaritan law, but we have seen some circumstances, Mr. Chair, where an individual has been moved from another location, and then they call law enforcement. In that situation, which we are currently in the process of litigating in certain circumstances, then we don't think the Good Samaritan law applies to the same degree because an individual is being moved there. The call was not immediate, right? They're not actually acting in that Good Samaritan fashion. And if they call 2 hours later after the person dies, they've moved the body, so to speak. So then it's not Good Samaritan there.
But my scenario the other day was in response to one witness, and that was, so the individuals took the person out of the motel, let him go onto the pavement, and then came out and asked the person who was driving the individual to drive around the block so he didn't die in the parking lot of the motel. And then no one, that individual who was in the car called 911. 911 came, tried Narcan, didn't work because there was xylazine in the substance. So they've done nothing other than to try to avoid responsibility. So if they called after he died in the parking lot, for example, I agree with you. Well, they did nothing they did everything they could to avoid responsibility and then make the call.
It's a fact-specific situation. Certainly there's overdoses you cannot avoid, and even if you call, as you sort of get the idea that the person may not be reviving.
So, does that help everybody with, I don't know if you're for it or against it, but does it help everybody understanding the connection between the drugs? And it's not illegal to possess xylazine, it's not illegal to possess fentanyl, correct?
So you can still prosecute for regulated drug possession, which is the way that you could pursue a fentanyl possession case if you want. That's, there's some catch-all language in Title 18 that allows for prosecution for a regulated drug, or there isn't, right, where the Department of Health has noted that it's a regulated drug, and it's not currently in your statutes as a sort of standalone piece like heroin or cocaine, and we're allowed to prosecute for that, but it's not a standalone possession case. So the answer to the question is sort of.
Sort of. So, looking back to the bill as it deals with the drug aspects. In my neighborhood, we took out the sections on mandatory minimum for. So that's part of it. Are there any other questions?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. We took out what?
We took out the mandatory minimum.
3 years, right?
Originally, it was 3 years mandatory.
But it's back in at 2 years now?
No, it's no mandatory minimum.
I don't remember us taking that out.
Well, it was zero, well, we voted to take it out early on. I think you voted against that.
Well, I did, because I looked at the name of the bill, and we're trying to protect folks here, and everyone has their own opinion on it. I can respect that, but I mean, now if you take that out, you take the knowingly out, and this bill doesn't accomplish anything.
Well, we're not taking knowingly out. We haven't decided to do anything.
I haven't decided as of yet, yeah.
And I believe we're keeping the death result and stuff. I haven't, the knowingly is, I'm supporting it. Especially if it's updated to the Second Circuit.
So,
Language.
do you keep a record of that, Ben, or when we took a vote on it, or just a straw vote, or what was that, taking
I think
out
it was
the
straw.
mandatory?
I think
don't
I
remember
made a
voting on
suggestion.
that. I'm sure it passed 4-0.
I'm not a record of that.
I don't remember it.
Senator Hashim had a question.
Thank you. It's, the thing I've been harping on for a while, and I'm still just trying to fully understand it. So I want to go back to the permissive inference, and, I'm trying to fully wrap my head around whether or not this is something that can or should be done. And, going back to state versus rounds, at the end of paragraph 24, it says that the rule requires, this is referencing rule 303C, the rules of evidence. At the end, it says the rule requires proof of the basic fact beyond a reasonable doubt before the court may submit a specific instruction on the permissive inference to the jury. So I think what I'm trying to understand is if the defense is removed, or if the defense is prohibited, is the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt still able to be met?
So you would still have to prove all the other elements of the crime.
Yeah.
Right, that they were the person that was distributing, selling, dispensing. What it does is if a person dies from ingesting the drug, you still have to prove everything else up. And the permissive inference piece, as you noted, provides that it's connecting the dots. The person's death, you can provide a permissive inference that the person's death is related to the person's use of the regulated drug. So they don't have to become, scientists in the jury room, right? They can help. You still have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The permissive inference doesn't remove that requirement as to each of the elements.
Oh, thanks.
And this will be subject to, litigation and motions to dismiss and further, like with any of the laws, you guys are cutting the marble, and then the courts and the way it happens actually we're putting in the details afterwards.
Thanks.
I had an epiphany and remembered when we took out the mandatory minimum. The State's Attorney Markovich testified on the bill, and particularly on the sections regarding death resulting and the need on the knowing and the difficulty of the knowing. And then she said, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't like mandatory minimums. I don't think that it doesn't help anything. And she basically said that. The next day I came in and said, given State Attorney Martin's comments about section 2, I think at the time that was section 2, should we take it out? And we just straw poll took it out.
With death resulting, we took it out.
No. The mandatory minimum of 3 years for sale or trafficking or fentanyl. The 30-year maximum stays as it is. Didn't change.
Does a 2-year minimum stay
Only
the way
thing
it
we
is?
took out was 3-year mandatory minimum for sale or trafficking.
Okay.
I think trafficking.
It was just on trafficking, and then there was no change to the mandatory minimum for sale with death result.
2 years still. Okay. That makes it easier for me.
You might have even agreed with me.
I might have.
But if you didn't, that's fine. But that's the way it happened. Actually.
I'm not concerned with the sale.
Yeah, when she testified on that, it just seemed to indicate that it wasn't worth fighting. There was enough other stuff.
Judge will send us whatever.
And part of the policy reason for that we've heard from prosecutors that prosecute drug crimes is that if you it gives you something that you can't negotiate if you're trying to resolve the case. If there's a minimum built in there, and the federal statute and the federal scheme is different for a bunch of reasons, but at the state level, when you're building in that new mandatory minimum, that's something that State's Attorney Markovich can't say, well, let's start with 9 months given the circumstances. It cuts that part out. And I think, I don't know if that's the reason why she testified to that, but I know that that's one of the difficulties with minimums, is it gives you the floor, and the floor is sometimes higher than you want it to start.
And since we didn't change the maximum at all in 30 years, we just took the section out in later drafts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't know I was testifying on this, but happy.
Well, no, it's very helpful, and I don't know where the committee will come down when we do the more markup later in the week. My understanding is that the General Affairs and Housing and Economic Development Committee will be looking at the sections regarding the eviction process. And we got an email from somebody who's opposed to those sections. She obviously hasn't read 7 days accounts at Decker Towers, but she's opposed, so we'll hear from her. But I think she's opposed to, I think she mentioned section 4, section 8. And the General Affairs Committee, Economic Development and Housing Committee is going to look at section 8 on Thursday. I don't really. And then we have, so I think we're getting close.
Commissioners, can I ask, so on the 2 pieces that Eric presented to you,
Yep,
are those ready to go?
as far as I'm concerned, they are.
But did you guys feel like I should fold them into the draft for
We should
tomorrow?
fold them into the draft for tomorrow, and then we can vote on whether we want to adopt them or not.
Okay,
Just highlight them in yellow.
So
okay.
yes, they still go to this.
That's the section on raise the age.
Yep,
With the
I
2-year
think
minimum.
that's pretty well settled.
okay,
And the section on,
We're still like.
Big 12,
okay.
or
And then you want me to add a new
the
section?
big 11 and the big
Yeah, I think
3.
Okay. And then you want me to add a new section directing the Department of Health to kind of do, I can look, I was just looking up how, because you had a public notice
Yeah.
to the, remember when you did your adoption bill, you
Yeah.
kind of had some, so some of the language department work with the cooperation of other departments to make reasonable efforts to notify members of the public, about that, and I can just add little few things.
Before we adjourn, I have an email to read part of for all of you, just so you know.
So do you want,
I'll just leave it on. Hi there. You people need to stop raising tax on everything. I do not support you on what you're doing in office. People are leaving the state because people like you make it hard to live here. I want to put that on the record.
And how does that,
You people.
how does that refer to us?
Well,
The
you
Judiciary.
people. You people.
Oh, you people, okay.
Didn't refer to me, just you people.
Now, there's some truth to that.
That's a good note to adjourn on. Thank you.
Hey,